Welcome to St. Louis and Me. I'm Michelle Anselmo. One of the important issues of our time is how we feed a growing planet and provide energy to sustain it without depleting natural resources and fouling the environment. On this edition of St. Louis and Me, we'll provide an overview of a vision that meets those challenges in a way that produces sustainable energy and helps the environment and creates valuable wildlife habitat. Roeslein Alternative Energy is implementing projects toward this vision by collaborating with other companies, environmental groups, government agencies, and academic institutions. Let's take a look at the short video that gives an overview of the opportunity and vision of Roeslein.
The world's population is expected to reach nearly 10 billion people by 2050. That kind of growth will place a tremendous amount of stress on our landscape. The stress comes from competing demands, the need for both food and energy to serve a growing planet. When land not naturally suited for agriculture is used to raise corn or soybeans, erosion, soil degradation, and water problems emerge. And ironically, the quest for additional energy often finds prime agricultural land-raising crops for fuel rather than food. But there is an alternative that restores balance. It creates a new sustainable energy industry, manages livestock and land resources better. Plus, it delivers clean water and new habitat.
One of the important aspects of what Rudi Roeslein is trying to do is not only to preserve the land for the future, but also in showing people ways that they themselves can put these practices into use on their own farms.
At the center of it all is anaerobic digestion, which has tremendous untapped potential in the U.S.
Anaerobic digestion is a technology that's been used for many years and is available now.
Germany has more than 7,900 anaerobic digestion facilities generating power for nearly 8 million homes. The opportunity is greater in U.S. farm country, where an estimated 8,200 dairy and swine operations could support anaerobic systems, creating a new multi-billion-dollar sustainable energy industry. Anaerobic digestion naturally breaks down organic matter in an oxygen-free environment. A byproduct is methane-rich biogas, which can be converted to renewable natural gas, chemically identical to fossil natural gas. It can be used as transportation fuel or injected into the natural gas grid system. The remaining solids can be used as natural fertilizer, the water for irrigation.
Here to elaborate on that vision is Rudi Roeslein, who founded and grew Roeslein & Associates into a global leader in engineering, procurement, modular fabrication, and construction of can-making and industrial plant facilities. He's also an avid outdoorsman who's turned his business acumen toward the challenge of simultaneously creating renewable energy, healing the environment, and providing essential new wildlife habitat. And we're so pleased and honored to have Rudi join us today. Thank you, Rudi.
Well, thanks, Michelle, for the opportunity to be here and talk about this.
So in the first clip, it talked a little bit about opportunity, and that's something that you've always seen. How does that relate to what you're doing here now?
Well, you know, most things in life are looked at either as problems or opportunities, and when I saw this particular opportunity, I thought there was a way to actually provide opportunities not only in food production but energy production, and not have those things looked at as silos that are independent. These things all have consequences, unintended consequences or real consequences that we really need to work on and stop thinking about as independent actions that have no unintended consequences. When you look at, you know, our natural resources are being consumed at alarming rates, whether our soil, our water, mining, and many other natural resources. And so what this vision looks at is that how can we take waste products, turn them into opportunities, to turn them into a market-based solution, and then potentially provide farmers an opportunity to be in the other industries and provide ecological services, wildlife habitat, and really take these problems that are out there today and turn them into real opportunities to monetize things in a different way.
When you talk a little bit about kind of that approach, how are you approaching it?
Well, the opportunity really came from looking at waste products from animals, and there is an opportunity right now in the renewable gas industry to turn that waste product into a market-based solution and sell it as a product And so I was introduced to this opportunity because of my involvement with the Missouri Prairie Foundation, who put some acreage onto what was then Premium Standard Farms, and they got involved in a lot of litigation over using that waste product on the landscape that created a lot of odor. Oftentimes it created some issues with water runoff and actually putting too much nitrogen into the streams and rivers. And so after studying it and looking at the German model, I really felt there was an opportunity to do what the Germans were doing, which turned that into energy.
And how long have you been doing this?
Well, it's been a 10-year odyssey. I really got introduced to this opportunity because I was doing some ethanol plants. And in the ethanol industry, they were primarily using corn, but then the renewable fuel standard looked towards what else can we use besides corn. And so there was a movement to actually try to produce ethanol from second generation biomass, and that was cellulosic material. And those materials were going to be corn stover or grain. And I really believed, for one, that it's a really, really complex process. The cost to produce it was extremely expensive. And the fact that they were going to use corn stover gave me some concern about what that would do to the landscape.
And when folks kind of look a little bit about what you're doing and they kind of see this two-pronged approach, is there like a two-horizon approach, and what does that mean?
Well, the first horizon really was to, try to monetize and provide a financial basis that justified the project. I have to admit this has been a lot harder than I ever imagined. It's taken a lot longer, and it's cost a lot more money than I ever imagined, and it's because it's a very complex process. When you look at companies like Smithfield, they've spent a tremendous amount of time and effort actually trying to move a process forward. But up until a few years ago, there really weren't the financial incentives. In 2015, the EPA approved a feedstock, manure as a feedstock for renewable gas. That put it into a classification that would provide a financial return that was big enough to justify some of these projects. So that was the basis of how we started this, because it would provide at least a marginal return. And then the second step was, my vision is all about, okay, how do you not only provide energy, but how do you look at what's going on in the environment and put something back in the environment? So unlike the original concepts of using strict monolithic biomass, I thought the best form of biomass would be something that also provides ecological services and provides some wildlife habitat, and we don't continue to take what's currently called marginal land and put it into more monolithic plants that are cultivars specifically for energy only, but really don't preserve our wildlife habitat and help clean our rivers, prevent soil erosion, prevent hypoxia, and actually provide for pollinators who are really losing, like our Monarch Butterfly, that's losing a lot of habitat and putting them into really a perilous situation.
Well, Rudi, let's take a closer look kind of at the Horizon 1, the infrastructure element, with this short video.
We're going to be producing a renewable energy from a product that in the past has been underutilized or perhaps even looked at as a waste product.
Horizon 1 involves a unique partnership with Smithfield Foods' Hog Production Division to convert manure from nearly 2 million hogs to renewable natural gas. The $120 million project will move manure into covered lagoons.
We will use an impermeable cover to cover those lagoons, and basically they will start to act as digesters. And then as the nutrients are broken down by the digester, Roeslein Alternative Energy will capture that gas.
The biogas is piped to a facility that cleans it of impurities like carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and water, upgrading it to renewable natural gas. The clean gas is then compressed in an adjacent system before being injected into the natural gas pipeline system. The integrated system to clean and compress the gas was engineered, installed, and commissioned by Roeslein & Associates, the worldwide leader in unitized and pre-assembled systems Rudi Roeslein founded in 1990.
It's going to make us better pig farmers. It's going to be good for our communities, good for our neighbors.
The environmental benefits include odor control, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and eliminating rainfall effects from treatment systems.
Well, Rudi, in the video, it talked a little bit about Smithfield and 2 million hogs, market hogs a year, and that's really just amazing, I think, to think about. We'll talk a little bit about that partnership and what that means to your project.
Well, I mean, if you look at food production, there's a lot of controversy right now about, confined animal units and animals being confined, whether they should be back on the landscape. But the realities are that, we produce almost 80 million hogs. And when we go to the next level of population, which could be almost 10 billion people in 50 years, we have to look back. As an immigrant, I came here in 1956. We had 50 million people. And you look at how pigs were raised and how animals were raised, and even my mother talks about how animals were raised in her days. But that waste then and the waste now is quantum leaps. If you put that level of pigs back onto the landscape, or if you put the dairy cattle back on the landscape, and the amount of methane that would be released, the damage that would create to the landscape is just enormous. So I feel very passionate about the efficiency of food production and how much less land we have to use as a result of that has much less of an impact. And so I became interested in this and said, okay, now what do we do with all that waste? Currently it's a problem. And so my approach was to take that waste and make an energy out of it. And it's not something that I originated. I saw it being done in Germany very efficiently. And we were going down a pathway of a drop-in fuel. Primarily the EPA and the Department of Energy said, hey, what we have to do is diminish the amount of pollutants we're putting into the atmosphere from diesel in our vehicles. And they kept pushing and promoting ethanol and alternatives to diesel, biodiesel. But I really felt in looking at natural gas and the value of natural gas and in terms of BTU value, but also the emissions from, and it's tremendously different. And so I felt passionate about that. And so the first step was really to take this manure and make a problem into a solution that provided some monetary returns and convince Smithfield that it wasn't going to cost them money, but in fact save them operational money, put them into a whole other industry, which is energy, and provided some real solutions to society about what we're going to do with all this manure.
And why is Prairie so important to this?
Well, when I was working on a couple ethanol plants, I went and visited Dr. David Tillman at the University of Minnesota, and Dr. Tillman had actually been researching what he felt was the next best biomass for the ethanol industry. And he had done a lot of calculations on different biomass potential and biomethane potential, and really felt that native grasses over long periods of time that you only had to plant once and that potentially could live, there's native grasses that are in some areas, even like in the Carpathians, that have been harvesting for hundreds of years, and those plants survive for a long time. They're able to sustain their viability through drought and through floods, and you only have to plant them once. And so in that process, originally I was thinking about ethanol because that's what I was working on, but when I started the German model of anaerobic digestion, I thought, well, what if we can use this as a second generation? And at the same time, what I studied was the other benefits that biomass would provide. Besides providing energy, it's providing these deep roots that sequester carbon. They're able to infiltrate water into the ground. They're able to prevent erosion. They're able to prevent a lot of the nitrogen and phosphorus that normally leaves fields and goes into our streams and river. And it would prevent hypoxia. And most importantly for me, I have this passion for wildlife, and somebody's got to speak up for wildlife and the land, that millions of acres that we lose every year that go into agriculture, and primarily corn and beans, which really, if you look at that in the wintertime, it's almost all dirt. I believe a lot of the flooding and the issues that we're having with water are a result of all this landscape that's changed between our urbanization and roofs and highways. And so putting a native plant that solves many of those problems and also provides a return on investment by providing energy, I thought was a much better solution than the direction we're currently going in.
Well, Rudi, let's take another closer look at Horizon 2.
Horizon 2 supplements the hog manure feedstock with biomass from land converted to native grasses and forbs to produce more renewable natural gas. This vision creates an economic and environmental model from a new energy crop, especially for land considered highly erodible or marginal.
The number of ecological benefits, environmental benefits you get from that are outstanding.
Horizon 2 seeks to generate revenue by using land to its fullest potential, sequestering carbon, cooling the atmosphere through transpiration and evaporation, thanks to the amazing root systems of native prairie.
Prairies differ very much in character. These prairies have tended to be cut up and plowed and cultivated. They didn't realize the intrinsic biological richness and integrity of this community.
Tallgrass prairie once covered 170 million acres in North America. Today, less than 4% remains.
And they're disappearing very rapidly, and that really changes the whole natural balance of the whole northern hemisphere. Like so many things in life, we're really beginning to realize the benefit of the prairies now that they're nearly all gone.
Native prairie offers bountiful ecological, wildlife, and economic benefits that can actually improve our quality of life.
Prairie gives us so many what we like to call ecosystem or ecological services.
Prairies support at least half of the state's pollinator diversity. And without that, the reproduction of plants and what that means to all the animals that depend on them, that would be broken.
The water storage, the water filtration, the soil erosion prevention.
You know, these grasslands have the ability to absorb up to an 8-inch rainfall. The amount of fertilizers that are going into our streams, much of that could actually be prevented by having strips or large areas that are surrounded by prairies.
Horizon 2 lays the foundation to restore native prairie and all the benefits it provides by establishing financial incentives for landowners.
Utilizing native grass on marginal land, harvested in a sustainable manner that creates ecological services and benefits, but also produces an energy crop that can be utilized to make energy.
Roeslein Alternative Energy and Smithfield are collaborating to do just that at Ruckman Farm in northern Missouri, where the project's first renewable natural gas produced from hog manure is entering the pipeline. Native grasses have been planted on more than 200 acres at Ruckman Farm, 700 acres at Valley View Farm, and another 1,000 acres are underway at several other farms in cooperation with Smithfield Foundation and the Environmental Defense Fund. The collaboration seeks to promote native prairie as a biomass that is a financially and ecologically viable alternative for land that is hilly, highly erodible, or land that borders streams and rivers where agriculture crops should not be planted.
That prairie biomass is awesome as a carbon source because all those nutrients have translocated below ground.
Rudi, let's talk in more detail why a market-based approach is needed to give landowners the financial reasons to go to prairie grass or to plant prairie.
Well, I think farmers, you know, like everyone, needs a return on their assets, and up to now it's been primarily from agriculture. So looking at farms and land and, you know, what services can it provide to the landowner, what services can it provide to society. I saw some models in Germany where they were doing both, and the kids, the young farmers, were staying on the farm because they were excited about this technology of anaerobic digestion. They were excited about helping the environment, and I think they had a market-based solution. I think probably in 2015 we came up with a market-based solution that included renewable natural gas, and that's really what started driving it. But I think what we need to do is go beyond renewable natural gas and also take a look at a market-based solution for nutrient losses, for pure water, and not think that we can just take all these things for granted as society and believe that landowners and farmers are going to do the right thing just because they're good stewards of the land. I mean, they have to make a return. They got kids they have to raise, they've got colleges, they got payments on their heavy equipment, and farming is difficult. I mean, there's a lot of times you have droughts, and yeah, we have insurance policy, but making a profit on farmland is difficult. So this would put farmers into the energy business, potentially put them into the business of helping purify our water. And, you know, society can think about where we spend it. Do we spend it in all these purification systems at our municipalities, or can we spend it upstream and have the farmers benefit to help them do the right thing?
Well, in this next video kind of explains exactly what you just told us from that high-level market component of this project.
The revenue potential is enhanced by regulatory incentives to create renewable fuel and improve air quality. The Federal Renewable Fuel Standard established renewable identification numbers. A RIN is proof that a gallon of RNG has been used as vehicle fuel. And the California-based Low Carbon Fuel Standards Program grants an LCFS credit for each metric ton of CO2 emissions reduction. There are vibrant markets where RINs and LCFS credits can be sold. This layered revenue from nutrient recovery, water quality improvement, wildlife habitat, and renewable natural gas would provide financial viability for a virtual pipeline to transport compressed natural gas to a common interconnect point. Plus, the one-time cost of establishing native grasses on marginal land is much lower than the annual economic expense of planting corn or soybeans.
It would definitely make the prairie strips another alternative revenue source for the farm. And if you can add on, in addition to sort of that tradable good in terms of prairie biomass, if you could start adding on credits for improved water quality or sequestered carbon, if you can layer sort of markets such that farmland with prairie strips is much more profitable than farmland without it.
The deep and diverse root systems of native plants pull water into the soil and reduce flooding.
It preserves the topsoils, nourishes them, ties up carbon, which could otherwise contribute to global warming, and really contributes to the biological richness and integrity of this community.
Native plants greatly reduce runoff and significantly reduce soil erosion.
Rudi is looking for the best formulas to keep nitrogen from flowing out, to preserve water, to preserve the ecological balance of prairie lands.
The project shows how using assets that are generally taken for granted as unproductive, livestock manure and highly erodible land, can actually be both economically and ecologically beneficial. It's a paradigm shift for energy production, the environment, and wildlife.
They can add to the bottom line of a farm operation and actually diversify farm income by putting a farmer into multiple industries. Right now he grows food. In the future he could be growing food, producing energy, and managing landscape. We've been doing things the same way for a lot of years, and it's time that people stood back and said, you know, maybe there's a better way to do it.
The better way, at its full potential, will create truly sustainable energy and tens of thousands of jobs in a new industry. The better way delivers new habitat, clean water, and begins to reverse the huge Mississippi River Delta dead zone, because 30 million acres of new prairie will prevent fertilizer runoff. This is our vision in action. Join us on our journey.
Rudi, what is the impact?
Well, I think the impact is tremendous environmentally. We're wringing our hands and arguing about global warming. But here's an opportunity to have market-based solutions that generates revenue, creates thousands of new jobs, and has a huge impact on carbon sequestration, soil erosion, hypoxia, and so many other things, including wildlife habitat and pollinators. And I think there's choices to be made by society and where we spend that money. And my hopes and dreams are that we can put 30 billion acres back strategically on the landscape to prevent some of the erosion, and that we can put 100 million acres of cover crops to prevent floods and use soil to help bring our atmosphere back and sequester water and actually sequester carbon and have a giant impact on all the things that we're worried about, but we just keep wringing our hands and tend to come to an agreement. And these things don't cost money. I think these would save society a tremendous amount of money and help reach some goals on what we're going to do both with the environment, with job security, and other sources of energy that do not pollute but actually are renewable and sustainable.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at the Environmental Defense Fund and Smithfield and what they're doing about this project.
For many decades, prairie habitat has been in decline because of our food system and the expansion of monocultures of corn and soy have created a landscape that's dominated by agriculture. The Monarch Butterfly was petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act, so it's definitely a species in need of conservation action. What most people don't know is that the status of the monarch, it's really an indicator of the health of the entire prairie ecosystem, so we need to restore the balance.
What do our plants do? It's kind of been taken for granted. These native grasses that have these deep roots would be able to sequester CO2. They're able to infiltrate water. They're able to eliminate nutrients from the soil that would normally run off into our streams and rivers. So they provide all these ecological services, but more importantly, they also provide a tremendous amount of food and habitat for our wildlife and our pollinators. Oftentimes, industry believes that those things cost a lot of money and that it affects their bottom line. We can have both. We have to have food production. So how do you collaborate to where we all have a common interest?
Our farms here have participated in prairie restoration for as long as 10 years. We're always looking for ways to add value. The biggest driver is the opportunity to maintain more soil moisture. Then we have the ability to use that prairie grass for the pollinators and the monarchs that are coming through. And now it's led us to the collaboration that we have with Roeslein Alternative Energy, venturing into how that prairie grass could be an alternative feedstock for digestion to make energy.
This is a three-dimensional approach. We can have energy, we can have ecological services, and we can have wildlife habitat. And the landowners benefit from a market-based solution.
The fact is that there aren't enough of those type of prairie patches across the landscape to support the monarch in enough numbers. Our hope is the prairie restoration that is coming out of this partnership will serve as a model for other companies that will step up and see the potential of this kind of conservation.
We're really creating another loop in the value chain that continually adds to an environmental impact. It supports our initiatives for carbon reductions, and it is the right thing to do.
Seeing this kind of prairie habitat and all the monarchs flying around and using the plants there, it makes me optimistic for the future because it works on this farm. It's beautiful, it's productive, it's helping the farmer, it's creating a more resilient agricultural system. This kind of habitat can be replicated in many other places across the agricultural landscape.
What's the easiest way to find out more information about this?
I think you can look at our website if you want to know more about Roeslein Associates and what my primary business is. You just look at that website, or you can look at Roeslein Alternative Energy. There's quite a few different dimensions, the farming dimensions, and what we do at our farms, and the experiments I've conducted at my farms, and also where we are on this project and how we're cooperating with Smithfield to move this forward.
Well, Rudi, thank you so much for joining us. True visionary.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity. Enjoyed it.
And that'll do it for us on this edition of St. Louis and Me. Until next time.